economic cost of living in America, what nobody tells you. Imagine landing in America with $5,000 in your bank account. You are excited. You have finally made it. You start imagining the apartment, the shopping, the restaurants, the new job, the freedom. Then, within a few weeks, something strange happens. That $5,000 starts disappearing. Not because you bought a luxury car, not because you went on an expensive vacation, but because America has a price tag attached to almost everything. Your room, your food, your transportation, your phone, your healthcare, even the money you earn from working can be reduced by taxes before it reaches your bank account. And this is where many newcomers make a mistake. They calculate how much money they need to enter America, but they don't calculate how much money they need to survive inside America. So in this video, we're going to break down the 7 major economic costs you face after arriving in the United States. And stay until the end, because I'm going to put everything together and show you what a realistic monthly budget can look like for one person trying to live relatively cheaply in America. Let's start with the expense that can destroy your budget faster than almost anything else. Number 1, housing. Your first major economic reality in America is simple. You need somewhere to sleep, and housing can become your biggest monthly expense. If you're arriving without family or friends who can accommodate you, your options may include hotels, Airbnb, shared rooms, renting a room in someone's house, or eventually getting your own apartment. And these options can have dramatically different prices. Let's say you choose the cheapest realistic option and rent a room in a shared apartment. Depending on the city and neighborhood, you could potentially spend several hundred to over $1,000 every month. Now imagine you want your own apartment. Suddenly, you're dealing with rent that can easily reach $1,200, $1,500, $2,000, or even several $1,000s a month in expensive cities. And here's something many people don't think about. Rent isn't always the only money you need when moving into an apartment. You may also need a security deposit. You may have application fees. You may have utility bills. You may need furniture. You may need internet. And depending on the rental situation, you may need to demonstrate income or meet other requirements. So the first month can be significantly more expensive than the second. This is why someone who arrives with $5,000 can suddenly feel financially uncomfortable. They may spend a large portion of that money simply getting established. And housing isn't just an American problem. It's one of the biggest expenses in household budgets across the country. In 2024, housing alone accounted for roughly 1/3 of average U.S. household spending. And that's before transportation, food, and everything else. So if you're trying to save money, housing is usually the first place to look. Living with roommates can dramatically reduce your monthly costs. But there's another problem. Even if you find affordable housing, you still need to eat. And that brings us to number 2. Number 2, food. Food sounds simple. You go to the supermarket, you buy food, you eat. But the economics change when you're living in America. You have 2 basic choices: cook your own food or eat outside. Cooking is generally cheaper, but even groceries can add up. Rice, meat, vegetables, bread, milk, eggs, cooking oil, drinks, snacks, cleaning supplies, and all the little things you don't think about when you're calculating your budget. You might walk into a supermarket thinking, I'm only buying a few things. Then you reach the checkout, and the total is much higher than you expected. Now imagine doing that every week. For someone living alone and trying to be careful, perhaps $300 to $500 a month on food might be a reasonable planning range, depending heavily on where they live and what they eat. But restaurants are where things can change quickly. You buy a meal, then another. You order delivery, you get coffee, you tip. Suddenly, food isn't $300 anymore. It can become $500, $700, or much more. And here's an important lesson. It's not always the big purchases that destroy your budget. It's the small purchases repeated every day. $5 here, $10 there, $20 for delivery, $15 for lunch. Do that repeatedly, and by the end of the month, you've spent hundreds of dollars without feeling like you've made a major purchase. And then there's another cost that can be even more unpredictable: transportation. Number 3, transportation. This is where America can surprise newcomers. In some countries, you can live comfortably without owning a car. But America is huge, and many cities and neighborhoods are designed around cars. If you live somewhere with excellent public transportation, you may be able to survive without one. But if you're living in a car-dependent area, things become different. You may need to take buses, trains, Uber, Lyft, or eventually buy a car. And owning a car isn't just about buying the vehicle. This is one of the biggest financial mistakes people make when calculating car costs. They think, okay, the car costs $20,000, but that's not the real cost. You also have fuel, insurance, maintenance, one. But if you're living in a car-dependent area, things become different. You may need to take buses, trains, Uber, Lyft, or eventually buy a car. And owning a car isn't just about buying the vehicle. This is one of the biggest financial mistakes people make when calculating car costs. They think, okay, the car costs $20,000, but that's not the real cost. You also have fuel, insurance, maintenance, repairs, registration, parking, and potentially a monthly car payment if you finance it. Even a relatively inexpensive car can become a recurring financial commitment. And if something breaks, you could suddenly be looking at a repair bill you didn't plan for. Now compare that with using Uber. You don't have to buy a car. You don't pay for insurance. You don't pay for maintenance. Sounds cheaper, right? Not necessarily. If you're taking rides frequently, those individual payments can accumulate quickly. A ride that costs $15 doesn't feel expensive, but if you're spending $15 several times a week, the monthly total can become significant. This is why your location in America matters so much. Living in a city with reliable public transportation can completely change your budget. Living somewhere where you need a car can change it again. And after transportation comes another expense that almost everyone needs: your phone. Number 4, phone and internet. In the modern American economy, your phone isn't just entertainment. It's part of your survival system. You may need it to communicate with your employer, apply for jobs, use banking apps, navigate, order transportation, receive verification codes, and communicate with family. So you need a mobile plan, and if you're renting your own place, you may also need home internet. Depending on your plan and provider, phone and internet together could easily become another recurring monthly expense. And here's the important thing about recurring expenses: they don't stop. Rent comes every month. Your phone bill comes every month. Internet comes every month. Insurance comes every month. These aren't one-time costs. They continuously drain your income. And then we reach one of the most underestimated parts of the American economy: healthcare. Number 5, healthcare. This is where things become serious. Because you can survive without a new pair of shoes, you can postpone eating at a restaurant, you can walk instead of taking an Uber, but you cannot always postpone a medical emergency. The American healthcare system can be extremely expensive without adequate insurance. A simple medical problem can potentially become a significant financial burden. And healthcare isn't only about hospital emergencies. There are doctor visits, prescription medications, dental care, eye care, specialist appointments, emergency treatment, and insurance premiums and out-of-pocket costs depending on your plan. This is why someone moving to America shouldn't only ask, how much does rent cost? They should also ask, what happens if I get sick? Because your budget can look perfectly healthy until an unexpected medical bill appears. And that's the difference between a normal expense and a financial shock. A normal expense is something you can plan for. A financial shock is something that suddenly changes your entire budget. And America has several possible financial shocks. But healthcare isn't the only thing that can surprise you, because even after paying for the necessities, you still have to live your life. Which brings us to number 6. Number 6, personal and everyday expenses. This category is where money quietly disappears. You need toothpaste, soap, shampoo, toilet paper, laundry detergent, haircuts, clothes, shoes, cleaning products, maybe a streaming subscription, maybe gym membership, maybe entertainment. Maybe you want to go out with friends. None of these expenses individually looks frightening, but together, they become a serious part of your monthly budget. Imagine someone earning what appears to be a good salary. They pay rent, they buy food, they pay transportation, they pay their phone, they pay insurance. Then they spend $100 here, $50 there, $80 somewhere else. At the end of the month, they ask, "Where did my money go?" This is why budgeting in America isn't simply about knowing your major bills. You need to understand your total cost of living, because the small expenses are constantly working against you. And there's one more thing that can reduce the amount of money you actually have available: taxes. Number 7, taxes. Let's say you find a job advertising a salary of $50,000 a year. You might immediately divide that by 12 and think, that's more than $4,000 every month. But that's not necessarily what reaches your bank account. Your gross salary isn't the same thing as your take-home pay. Depending on your circumstances, taxes and other deductions can reduce what you actually receive. Federal taxes, potential state and local taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and potentially other deductions connected to employment benefits. This is why two people earning the same salary can have different financial situations depending on where they live and what benefits or deductions apply to them. And this is one of the most important economic lessons for anyone moving to America. Don't budget using your gross salary. Budget using your expected take-home income, because your landlord doesn't care about your gross salary. Your grocery store doesn't care. Your transportation company doesn't care. Your bills are paid with the money that actually reaches your account. And now we've reached the part that brings everything together. So, how much money do you really need? Let's imagine one person who is trying to live relatively cheaply. They're sharing accommodation instead of renting an expensive apartment. They're cooking most of their meals. They're using public transportation where possible. They're not constantly eating at restaurants. They're controlling their entertainment spending. And they're trying to avoid unnecessary purchases. A rough monthly planning budget could look something like this. Housing, around $700 to $1,200 for shared accommodation. Food, around $300 to $500. Transportation, perhaps $100 to $300, depending on location and how you travel. Phone and internet, around $70 to $150. Personal and miscellaneous expenses, around $150 to $300. Healthcare and insurance, potentially another $100 to $400 or more, depending heavily on circumstances and coverage. That puts the rough total somewhere around $1,420 to $2,850 or more per month. And remember, that's not a luxury lifestyle. That's someone actively trying to control their spending. Now imagine you're living alone in an expensive city. You have your own apartment, you have a car, you eat out frequently, you have higher insurance costs, you go shopping, you enjoy entertainment. Suddenly, $3,000 a month doesn't sound unrealistic, and $4,000 or $5,000 can disappear much faster than someone outside America might imagine. This is why comparing American salaries with salaries in other countries can be misleading. You can't simply say, someone in America earns $4,000 a month, therefore they're rich. You have to ask, how much is their rent? Do they own a car? How much is their insurance? How much do they spend on food? What taxes do they pay? Do they have debt? Do they have children? Do they live in New York or somewhere much cheaper? The salary is only half of the story. The other half is the cost of maintaining the life that comes with that salary. The biggest lesson. So what is the real economic lesson of living in America? It's not that America is simply expensive. That's too simple. America can be extremely expensive in some places and much more affordable in others. The real issue is that your expenses are highly dependent on your lifestyle and location. A person living with roommates, cooking at home, and using public transportation can have a completely different financial reality from someone renting a luxury apartment, owning a new car, and eating at restaurants every week. Two people can live in the same country and experience completely different versions of America's economy. And that's why newcomers need to think beyond the question, how much money do I need to come to America? The better question is, how much money will I need every month after I get there? Because arriving in America is one financial challenge. Staying financially stable after you arrive is another. And sometimes the second challenge is the bigger one. So if you're planning to live in the United States, don't only calculate your dream. Calculate the rent, calculate the food, calculate transportation, calculate healthcare, calculate taxes, calculate the small expenses, and most importantly, Leave room for the unexpected, because in America, the biggest financial problem isn't always the bill you know is coming. Sometimes it's the bill you never saw coming. And that is the real economic cost of living in America.